The Grand Conclave on Cygnus X. One was a testament to tranquility enforced by overwhelming power. It was a place of shimmering energy fields and impossible architecture, where the gravity itself seemed to bow in respect to the delegates. Here, the three great powers maintained the long peace, a carefully constructed edifice of treaties and threats that had kept the galaxy in a state of profitable stagnation for millennia. Imperator Valerius Khan of the Valerian ascendancy adjusted. His silken robes, the motion conveying a sublime boredom. Across the polished obsidian table, the crystalline form of index helix of the crystalline concord refracted the light of a captive star. Between them hovered a swirling nebula of light, the psionic projection of the nexus mind of the myriad. Swarm. The Cthar trade sanctions are a triviality. The Imperator's voice resonated, each word a pronouncement. Their violation of the asteroid seeding treaty was minor. A fine will suffice. It restores order. Index Helix remained motionless, but its voice chimed through the chamber's translators. Probability of recidivism is 12.7%. A punitive tariff on their heavy metal exports would be 34% more effective as a deterrent. The Nexus Mind's voice was a chorus of a billion thoughts, harmonized into a single, serene whisper. The imbalance is slight. A warning restores. The pattern. Let it be so. Valerius Khan was about to agree when a minor addendum scrolled across his private display. One final matter, he sighed. This Terran problem. A tier, 7 emergent species. They are expanding beyond their designated containment zone. A minor violation, but an untidy one. He thought of them as cosmic vermin, spreading chaotically. Their very existence was an offense against the perfect order he cherished. Index Helix pulsed a soft blue. The humans. A chaotic variable. Low probability threat. Their technology is primitive, their social structures illogical. Our projections indicate they will self-annihilate within 500 cycles. They are a discordant note in the grand symphony, the Nexus Mind added. Their potential for chaos is noted, but insignificant. A containment protocol is sufficient. Agreed, the Imperator declared, making a subtle gesture to an aide. A covert action would be authorized, a quiet discouragement, perhaps a freighter lost to pirates, to remind the primitives of their place. He had already forgotten the name of their species. They were a footnote, a speck of dust to be swept from the grand, orderly design of his galaxy. He had more important matters to attend to. The peace, after all, had to be maintained. The bridge of the Terran Mandate ship Resolution was a world away from the shimmering opulence of the Grand Conclave. Here, there was no art, only function. Every surface was worn gray metal, every console was designed for brutal efficiency, and the air hummed with the steady, reassuring thrum of the ship's fusion core. It was a place of work, not comfort, and for Captain Elias Thorne, it was home. For 6 months, they had patrolled the drift. A desolate stretch of space bordering Valerian territory, a silent vigil in the galactic backwater. The tedium was a palpable force, broken only by system diagnostics and patrol vector updates. Anything on long range, Lieutenant? Thorne asked, his voice a low rumble that cut through the bridge's quiet hum. Same as the last sweep, sir. Cosmic background radiation and the ghost of a pulsar 2 systems over, replied the junior officer at the comm station, his gaze fixed on the waterfall of data. Wait a minute. The officer leaned forward, his brow furrowed in concentration. Sir, I'm picking up a repeating signal. It's faint, buried under layers of interference. The quiet monotony of the bridge shattered. Commander Kenji Tanaka, the ship's tactical officer, moved silently to the comm station, his lean frame radiating a predatory stillness. Filter out the background noise. Isolate the carrier wave. Trying, sir. It's heavily degraded. Whatever it is, it's old. Thorne stood from his command chair, his presence filling the small bridge. He watched as the officer wrestled with the signal, coaxing a fragile waveform onto the main screen. It was weak, corrupted, but it was there. And it was repeating. It's a Terran code, the officer whispered, his voice a mix of shock and awe. An old one. A deep space distress beacon. Dr. Eris Thorne, the captain's sister and the ship's chief science officer, emerged from her lab, drawn by the sudden tension. She pushed a stray strand of black hair from her eyes and peered at the data. The signal decay, the red shifting, factoring in its point of origin. Elias, this signal is at least 2 years old. Kenji's eyes narrowed as he cross-referenced the signal's trajectory on the tactical display. Sir, the origin point is deep within the Serpent's Veil. That's Valyrian ascendancy territory. Acknowledged forbidden zone. He didn't need to state the obvious. To enter that system was to commit an act of war. Eris's hands flew across her console, her expression grim. I'm running a comparison against the Mandate's Lost Vessel Registry. The frequency, the modulation, it's a match. She looked up at her brother, her face pale. Elias, it's the Odyssey. The name hung in the air, heavy with the weight of 5,000 lost souls. The colony ship had vanished without a trace 2 years ago, presumed destroyed by a freak meteor storm. A tragedy, but one of many in the unforgiving void. Now, this ghost of a signal suggested a different, more terrible fate. Thorn felt the twin pressures of his command crush down on him. On one hand, logic, strategy, the survival of his crew, and the fragile peace dictated by treaties he was sworn to uphold. Violating Valyrian space with a warship was an unambiguous provocation, an act that could doom humanity. On the other hand, the foundational principle of the Terran Mandate, the one creed every officer knew by heart, none left behind, that he stared at the weak, flickering signal on the screen. It was more than a distress call. It was a question aimed directly at him across 2 years of silence and light years of forbidden space. It asked what it truly meant to be human. Captain Thorn's ready room was an extension of the man himself, Spartan, functional, and devoid of sentiment. The only decoration was a single viewport showing the indifferent stars. He stood before it, hands clasped behind his back, as his senior officers filed in. Commander Tanaka, with his strategist's mind, took a seat at the small metal table. Chief Engineer McLeod, a man whose face was a roadmap of grease stains and radiation burns, leaned against a bulkhead, arms crossed. Eris stood beside him, her expression a mixture of scientific curiosity and deep-seated worry. The situation is this, Elias began, turning from the viewport. His voice was flat, betraying no emotion. The Odyssey is broadcasting a 2-year-old distress call from inside Valyrian territory. We are the only Terran vessel within a month's travel. The floor is open. Kenji spoke first, his words as precise and cold as a surgeon's scalpel. Sir, with respect, the choice is clear. We report our findings to High Command and await orders. We are one patrol vessel. The Valyrian ascendancy is one of the 3 great powers. To enter their sovereign space is an unambiguous act of war, a war we cannot win. Our duty is to this ship and this crew. McLeod grunted his agreement. The commander's right, Captain. The Resolution is a tough ship, but she's a patrol cruiser, not a dreadnought. Her reactor is rated for long-duration patrols, not sustained combat against a fleet. If we go in, we might not come out. The logic was undeniable, a cold, hard wall of fact. Elias looked at his sister. Eris met his gaze, her own eyes burning with an intensity that went beyond her scientific passion. 5,000 people, Elias, she said softly, but her voice cut through the sterile logic of the room. 5,000 colonists who look to the stars for a new beginning. We can't just leave them. We don't know if they're alive, but if there's even a chance. She let the words hang in the air. A chance to do what, Eris? Kenji countered. To get 1,200 more people killed? The crew of the ship? We have to consider the strategic reality. Damn the strategic reality. Eris shot back. We're talking about people. The Mandate was founded on one principle, Kenji, none left behind. Is that just a slogan we put on recruitment posters, or does it actually mean something? Elias remained silent, letting their arguments wash over him. Kenji was right. McLeod was right. And Eris was right. He was trapped between his duty to his crew and his duty to his species. He closed his eyes, and for a moment, he saw the faces from the Odyssey's crew manifest, smiling families, hopeful children that he opened his eyes. His resolve had hardened into something cold and absolute. He moved to his terminal and typed out a short, encrypted message to Terran High Command. It was not a request for orders. It was a declaration of intent, an action that, once taken, could never be undone. He turned back to his officers. Thank you for your input. My decision is made. He looked at his engineer. Mac, I want your reactor putting out 110%. I don't care how you do it. He turned to his tactical officer. Kenji, I want battle plans for engaging a Valyrian patrol fleet. Assume we are outnumbered at least 10 to 1. Finally, he looked at his sister. Eris, keep working on that signal. I want to know everything it can tell us. He paused, meeting each of their gazes. Set course. For the signal's origin. Maximum burn. We're bringing our people home. The resolution dropped out of hyperspace into the roiling, toxic clouds of Viridian 3's upper atmosphere. Below them, the planet was a nightmare landscape, a world flayed alive. Enormous strip mining operations scarred the rust-colored continents. Vast, open wounds that bled dust into the thin, unbreathable air. This was no colony. It was a graveyard in the making. Stealth systems engaged. We're holding position inside the cyclonic storm, Kenji reported, his voice a low monotone. On the main view screen, filtered sensor data painted a grim picture. Orbital analysis complete. I count 12 Valyrian warships in a standard garrison formation. 1 heavy cruiser, for destroyers, 7 patrol frigates. They're lazy, Thorne observed, studying the patrol vectors. The alien ships moved with an unhurried, arrogant grace, their routes predictable. Overconfident. They think no one would dare enter their territory. Eris worked silently at her science station, her face illuminated by the glow of her console. She had been filtering the faint distress signal for hours, peeling back layers of static and decay, trying to reconstruct the final, desperate message from the Odyssey. The ship shuddered as atmospheric turbulence rocked the hull, but no one on the bridge flinched. Their focus was absolute. I've got it, Eris said, her voice strained. I've managed to restore the final data packet. Put it on my private channel, Elias commanded. He didn't want the rest of the bridge crew to hear this until he had. He listened, his face a mask of stone, as a desperate, pain-filled voice echoed in his ear. Not just working us to death, they're taking people, for the labs, studying us. They want to know why we don't break, why we heal so fast. They call it genetic resilience. God, they're not just mining minerals, they're mining us. Please, if anyone hears this, kill us. Just kill us all. The message ended in a burst of static. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. Elias looked at his sister. Her eyes were filled with a mixture of horror and fury. The telemetry confirms it, she whispered, her voice trembling. The signal is coming from that massive complex near the southern pole. It's a prison, a labor camp, and a biological research facility. She took a shuddering breath. They're not just mining minerals, Elias. They're mining our DNA. The word struck Thorne with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't enslavement. This was a desecration. A war crime of a magnitude he could barely comprehend. The Valyrians, with their talk of order and civilization, were dissecting his people like lab rats, harvesting their biological tenacity for their own ends. His decision to come here had been born of duty and hope. Now, that was gone, burned away and replaced by something colder, harder, and infinitely more dangerous. This was no longer a rescue mission. Kenji looked up from his tactical display. Their patrol patterns are loose, sir. Their shield harmonics are on standard frequencies. They won't be expecting a direct assault from a single, out-of-class vessel. Thorne turned from the screen, showing the suffering planet. His choice was no longer a choice. It was an imperative. Warm up the mass driver, Commander, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. And prepare the Marines for a ground assault. This mission has been reclassified. Kenji nodded, a grim understanding in his eyes. Objective, sir? Retribution. The TMS resolution ascended from the churning, rust-colored clouds of Viridian 3 like a specter of judgment. It was a dark, brutalist wedge of a ship, its hull scarred and functional, devoid of the elegant lines and gleaming finishes of the Valyrian vessels. Against their artful, sweeping curves, the human ship was an obscenity, a declaration of function over form, a mailed fist in a room of porcelain statues. For a long moment, it simply hung there in the void, a silent, menacing presence. Then, it powered its weapons. Aboard the Valyrian Ascendancy flagship, Vigilance, Praetor Xylosvorn stared at his view screen in stunned disbelief. The bridge of the Vigilance was a masterpiece of imperial design, a vaulted, cathedral-like space where command was conducted with the ceremony of a high ritual. The sudden appearance of the unknown vessel was a jarring intrusion. "Identify," Xylos Vorn commanded, his voice sharp with annoyance. "The configuration is Terran, Praetor," his sensor adept reported, his tone laced with confusion. "A single patrol cruiser. Their weapon systems are active." The Praetor's disbelief melted into pure, unadulterated contempt. A single patrol cruiser? A primitive vessel from a chaotic, Tier 7 species? He almost laughed. This was not a threat. It was an insult. "They are hailing us, Praetor," the communications adept announced, on screen. "Let us hear what these primitives have to say for themselves before we dismantle them." Captain Elias Thorne's face filled the main display. He was not seated in a grand command throne, but standing, his expression grim, his eyes holding a cold fire that Xylos Vorn found unsettling. "This is Captain Thorne of the Terran Mandate Ship Resolution," Elias said, his voice level and devoid of the deference the Praetor expected. "You are holding 5,000 Terran civilians in your facility on the planet below. They are to be released to our custody immediately." The audacity of the demand was so profound that for a moment, Xylos Vorn was speechless. Then a low chuckle escaped his lips, a sound of condescending amusement. He turned to his bridge officers, sharing the joke. "Did you hear that? The primitive is making demands." He turned back to the screen, his expression one of a master chiding a disobedient pet. "Human captain, you have committed an act of war by entering our sovereign space. You are outmatched, outclassed, and out of your depth. I will offer you this one chance, in recognition of your species' amusing bravado. Power down your systems and surrender your vessel. Your crew will be processed, and your own death will be swift." Thorne did not reply to the Praetor. He did not engage in threats or pleas. He simply stared through the screen, his cold gaze locking with Xylos Vorn's. He had seen the evidence of their atrocities. There was nothing left to say. His reply was for his own crew, a quiet, chilling command that the Valyrian translators barely registered before the connection was cut. "Kinji," Thorne said calmly. "Erase them." For Xylos Vorn, this was the pinnacle of righteous indignation. He would swat this annoying fly, make an example of these upstart barbarians, and restore the perfect, orderly silence to his domain. He gave the order to fire, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over him. He had no way of knowing that on the bridge of the Resolution, Captain Thorne felt nothing at all, save for the chilling focus of imminent, necessary violence. The time for words was over. The Valyrian fleet fired as one. 12 lances of incandescent plasma, elegant and silent, converged on the lone human ship. It was a display of overwhelming force, a perfectly coordinated strike designed to atomize any vessel that dared to defy the ascendancy. The plasma washed over the Resolution's hull in a silent, searing wave. On the bridge of the Vigilance, Praetor Xylos Vorn watched, expecting the satisfying bloom of an explosion. Instead, something baffling occurred. The human ship did not explode. It did not even appear to have energy shields. The plasma simply splashed against its dark, featureless hull. Layers of the ship's armor boiled away into the vacuum, vaporizing in a cloud of superheated gas. But the vessel itself remained intact, a stubborn, unyielding rock in a river of fire. "Report." Xylos Vorn snapped. "Praetor, their ship has no energy shielding," his adept stammered, his voice filled with disbelief. "It appears to be merely thick armor. Brute force engineering." Before the Praetor could process this absurdity, the human ship responded. There was no elegant energy beam, no shimmering torpedo. There was only a flash of light from the vessel's spine, a brief, terrifying glint of electromagnetic energy. Aboard the Resolution, Kinji Tanaka was a calm nexus in a storm of controlled chaos. Main battery, fired. Acquiring new target solution. Port railguns, fire on frigate designation Gamma. Starboard missiles, lock on cruiser designation Beta's shield emitters. His voice was the only sound on the bridge, a conductor's baton directing a symphony of pure destruction. The city block-sized tungsten slug fired from the Resolution's spinal mass driver crossed the distance to the nearest Valyrian destroyer in less than a second. It traveled at a significant fraction of the speed of light, a silent, idiotic projectile that cared nothing for the elegant physics of energy shields. The Valyrian vessel's shields flared, designed to disperse energetic particles and radiation. They were not designed to stop a mountain moving at relativistic speeds. The slug passed through the destroyer as if it were not there. There was no explosion, just a brief, silent flicker as every system aboard the Valyrian ship died at once. A perfect, cylindrical hole now existed where the ship's midsection had been. It came apart in two neat, silently tumbling pieces of wreckage, its crew dead before they even knew they were under attack. The collective gasp went through the bridge of the Vigilance. What was that? Xylos Vorn demanded, his voice trembling. For the first time. Kinetic impact, Praetor, his tactical adept whispered, his appendages shaking. A solid projectile. Barbaric. The battle, if it could be called that, devolved into a massacre. The Resolution, ignoring the plasma fire that continued to harmlessly boil away its outer armor, began to methodically dismantle the Valyrian fleet. Its secondary railguns, firing smaller but equally devastating projectiles, acted like cosmic shotguns, shredding the delicate, exposed shield emitters on the Valyrian frigates. Without their primary defense, the smaller ships were helpless. Swarms of missiles, far more maneuverable than any civilized ordnance, bypassed defensive fire to strike at maneuvering thrusters and communication arrays, crippling ship after ship. Targeting solution locked on cruiser Beta's bridge, Kenji stated calmly. Fire. On the Vigilance, Xylos Vorn watched in horror as the bridge of his second-in-command's vessel simply ceased to exist, punched out of reality by another unseen projectile. They are not fighting with honor, one of his officers cried out. In panic. There is no artistry, no duel. This is butchery. The Praetor's entire universe was collapsing. His understanding of naval combat, honed over centuries of tradition, was being shattered by a single, ugly, primitive ship. They didn't use elegant energy systems. They used layered metal. They didn't fire controlled energy beams. They threw rocks. They didn't engage in honorable ship-to-ship duels. They identified key weaknesses and struck with merciless, mathematical precision. They were not warriors. They were exterminators. He stared at the human ship on his view screen. It continued its relentless, methodical advance, shrugging off plasma fire that would have crippled any other vessel. Its ugly hull a testament to a philosophy of warfare so alien, so brutally pragmatic, that his mind could barely comprehend it. This wasn't a battle. This was a statement. And Xylos Vorn, a being who had never known fear, was finally beginning to understand what it said. While the Resolution dismantled the Valyrian fleet in orbit, hell was descending upon the prison mine. A Viridian 3. 10 drop pods, streaking through the thin, rust-colored atmosphere, slammed into the facility's superstructure like armored fists. They were not elegant landing craft. They were crude, brutal instruments of orbital insertion, and from them emerged the first Marine Combat Insertion Team. Major Kate Phillips was the first one out, her juggernaut-powered armor thudding onto the metal floor. The air hissed with the sound of hydraulic servos and the low hum of the suit's internal power core. The Valyrian guards, accustomed to docile, terrified prisoners, barely had time to register the impossible intrusion before the Marines were upon them. Breach, flash, clear. Phillips's voice was a clipped, professional bark over the squad's encrypted comms. Her team moved with a terrifying, fluid efficiency that belied the bulk of their armor. A shaped charge blew the main laboratory door off its hinges. A flashbang grenade detonated inside, incapacitating the Valyrian scientists with a blast of disorienting light and sound. The Marines stormed in, their rifles firing non-lethal shock rounds that dropped the robed figures where they stood. The lab was a chamber of horrors. Humans were strapped to tables, connected to arcane alien machinery. Others were held in stasis fields, their bodies riddled with probes. Phillips felt a cold, clean rage settle over her, a feeling far more dangerous than simple anger. It was the righteous fury of a protector who had arrived too late to prevent the atrocity, but just in time for the reckoning. Squad Beta, secure the lower levels. Find the main prison block, she commanded. Squad Gamma, with me. We're clearing these labs. No prisoners. These aren't soldiers, they're torturers. Treat them accordingly. The Valyrian guards, who fancied themselves warriors of a great empire, discovered the profound difference between policing unarmed miners and fighting dedicated human soldiers. The Marines moved through the corridors like a force of nature. They didn't use cover so much as create it, smashing through walls and bulkheads. They didn't engage in firefights. They initiated overwhelming assaults that ended in seconds. The Valyrians' plasma weapons, so effective against unarmored targets, splashed ineffectively against the Juggernaut armor. In return, the Marines' magnetic accelerator rifles fired iron slugs that tore through the guards' ceremonial armor and the bodies within. Phillips kicked open a door to a records room and found a Valyrian officer frantically trying to wipe the facility's data core. She didn't waste a round. She crossed the room in 2 heavy strides and drove her armored fist through the console and the alien's chest along with it. They found the main body of colonists in the deep mines, huddled together in vast, dark caverns. They were skeletal, their eyes wide with terror and disbelief. When they saw the armored figures with the Terran Mandate insignia on their shoulders, many of them simply wept. An old man, his skin pale and translucent from years without sunlight, stumbled toward Phillips. You came, he croaked. We came, Phillips confirmed, her voice softening for the first time. Her suit's external speakers translated her words. What is your name? Davis, a colonist from the Odyssey. He grabbed her armored gauntlet, his grip surprisingly strong. They kept taking the strong ones. The ones who didn't get sick. They wanted to know why we don't break, why we keep getting up. He collapsed, but another Marine was there to catch him. Phillips looked at the thousands of suffering faces, at the children hiding behind their parents, at the evidence of systematic, cold-blooded torture all around her. The cold rage within her coalesced into a single, hard point of clarity. The Valyrians hadn't just committed a crime against humanity. They had made a fundamental, philosophical error. They had mistaken the resilience of their test subjects for passivity. They had studied the unyielding nature of the human spirit and had failed to understand that the same quality that allowed humans to endure also fueled their capacity for retribution. They had poked the beast to see how it was made, never once considering that the beast might get out of its cage. The space above Viridian 3 was silent once more, a tomb littered with the shattered remains of the Valyrian garrison. 11 ships were ruined husks, their elegant forms twisted into grotesque sculptures of metal. Only the flagship, the Vigilance, remained, crippled, powerless, and adrift. A single human dropship docked with its breached hull, and Major Phillips's Marines took the bridge without firing a shot. Praetor Xylos Vorn stood amidst the wreckage of his command center, a being utterly broken. His ceremonial armor was cracked, his bridge was filled with the dead and dying, and his fleet was gone. He did not resist when the heavily armored humans stormed the bridge. There was no point. His entire conception of the universe had been invalidated in 17 minutes of brutal, incomprehensible violence. His emergency view screen flickered to life. It was the human captain, Thorn. The man's face was still a mask of cold fury, but his background had changed. The bridge of the Resolution was now crowded with the rescued colonists. Skeletal, rail-thin figures were being wrapped in thermal blankets by Thorn's crew. The haunted, hollowed-out eyes of human children stared out from the screen, a silent accusation more powerful than any weapon. Thorn's voice was low, carrying across the ruined bridge with the weight of a final judgment. It was devoid of triumph, devoid of arrogance. It was the voice of a man stating a simple, terrifying fact. This is the price for harming our children, Thorn said. This is the consequence of your experiments. Look at them, Praetor. Look at what you have done. Xylos Vorn could not tear his gaze away from the screen. He saw the suffering his ascendancy had inflicted, not as a statistic in a report, but as a living, breathing reality. He saw the faces of the beings he had dismissed as primitives, as subjects, and saw in them a resilience that his own superior species could never comprehend. We are not a species you can experiment on, Thorn continued, his voice dropping even lower, becoming a quiet promise of future violence. We are not a resource for you to harvest. We are not a footnote in your galactic history. We are humanity. We do not forget what has been done to us, and we do not forgive. He leaned closer to the camera, his eyes locking onto the Praetors. You are alive for one reason, Xylos Vorn. You are a message. Go back to your Imperator. Go back to your crystalline allies and your hive mind partners. Show them the recordings of this battle. Show them the faces of our rescued people. And you tell them this. We are coming for the rest of our people. All of them. There is no corner of this galaxy where you can hide them from us. There is no treaty that will protect you. There is no power you possess that will stop us. Thorn paused, letting the weight of his words settle. You mistook our desire for peace for weakness. You saw our civilization and assumed it had made us soft. You have learned today that our civilization was built on a foundation of savagery. You cannot possibly imagine. This is your only warning. The next time we meet, there will be no conversation. The screen went dark. Praetor Xylos Vorn sank to his knees, his imperial pride shattered into a million pieces. For the first time, he felt true, unadulterated terror. He finally understood. Humanity was not primitive. They were post-barbaric. They were a species that had perfected the art of war to such a degree that they had chosen to hide it, to put it away and strive for something better. And the Valyrian ascendancy, in its arrogance, had just given them a reason to take it out. Again, the news of what transpired in the Serpent's Veil spread through the secure channels of the great powers like a virus. When the crippled form of the Vigilance limped back into Valyrian space, its praetor a broken, raving shell of his former self, the Ascendancy's reaction was one of stunned, furious disbelief. Humiliation was an emotion the Valyrians had not experienced in 10,000 years. Imperator Valerius Khan convened an emergency session of the Grand Conclave. The opulent chamber, usually a place of calm, ceremonial discourse, was now a cauldron of panic and rage. A massive holographic display dominated the room, playing footage from the Vigilance's data recorders that IT showed the single, ugly human ship absorbing plasma fire that should have slagged it. It showed the silent, brutal efficiency of the kinetic projectiles punching through Valyrian hulls. It showed the armored human soldiers storming the labs, their movements a terrifying ballet of controlled violence. The Imperator let the footage play on a loop, forcing his allies to witness the full scope of the disaster. This was not a battle. Valerius Khan seethed, his voice echoing with cold fury. It was an extermination, an act of unprovoked, barbaric aggression by a species we had dismissed as insignificant. He framed the event not as a response to his own empire's atrocities, but as a direct assault on galactic order itself. These humans have mastered a form of warfare we abandoned as uncivilized millennia ago. They fight without honor, without rules, without restraint. They are a pestilence, a chaotic plague that must be purged before it spreads. The crystalline form of Index Helix glowed with agitated light. Its internal processors, which had once calculated humanity as a low-probability threat, were now racing to recalibrate. The data is anomalous. The variable of human aggression was incorrectly weighted. Their capacity for focused violence exceeds all known models for a Tier 7 species. They represent a high-variance chaotic variable, a destabilizing agent with the potential to unravel the established order. The psionic projection of the Nexus mind swirled, its harmonious whisper now laced with a thread of discord. Their violence is not random. It is purposeful, focused. They are a discordant symphony that threatens to drown out the music of the spheres. They threaten the great pattern. The imbalance they represent must be excised to restore cosmic stability. Fear and wounded pride were powerful motivators. For centuries, the three powers had maintained their dominance through a carefully balanced system of threats and treaties. The humans, with their brutal pragmatism, threatened to kick the entire game board over. They did not play by the established rules, and that made them an existential threat not just to the Valyrians, but to the very foundation of galactic peace. They cannot be allowed to challenge the order we have so carefully maintained, the Imperator declared. Their very existence is an affront to civilization. Index Helix chimed its agreement. A unified, overwhelming response is the most logical course of action. The probability of their surrender when faced with our combined might is 98.4%. The pattern must be restored, the Nexus mind concluded. The Swarm will join you. The Concord will join you. We will move as one. A consensus was reached not through logic, but through a shared terror of the unknown. They would form a grand armada, the greatest fleet the galaxy had ever seen. They would travel to the human home system and extinguish this chaotic, unpredictable flame before it could grow into a fire that consumed the galaxy. They were the great powers, the architects of peace and order. They were moving to crush a nascent, barbaric threat. It was, they all agreed, the only civilized thing to do. The Grand Armada tore through hyperspace, a wave of righteous fury 2,000 ships strong, aimed at the heart of the Terran system. Imperator Valerius Khan stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the Indomitus, confident that the sheer spectacle of his fleet would be enough to break the humans' primitive will. He imagined their panicked transmissions, their desperate pleas for mercy. He anticipated their swift, unconditional surrender. He expected to find a planet defended by a few battered patrol ships. What he found was the Terran Mandate home fleet, and it was waiting for them in the rings of Saturn. It was not a fleet of patrol cruisers. These were warships, thick-spined, dreadnoughts, and sleek, deadly carriers that emerged from the shadow of the gas giant like predators. There were hundreds of them, a fleet whose existence defied every intelligence report the ascendancy possessed. At their head hung the TMS Aegis, a vessel so large it blocked out the stars, its hull plated in dark, non-reflective armor that seemed to drink the light that a single transmission emanated from the human flagship, broadcast on all frequencies. Its message stark and simple. On the screen, a woman with silver hair and eyes as hard as forged steel stared out at the armada. She wore the stark black uniform of a fleet admiral. "I am Fleet Admiral Eva Rostova of the Terran Mandate," she said, her voice calm and absolute. "You have come to our home to threaten our children. You will not leave." The transmission ended. The battle began. The alien commanders, confident in their overwhelming numbers, ordered a full frontal assault. It was the last predictable move they would make. What they faced was not a battle line, but a three-dimensional storm of controlled chaos. Rostova was not a commander. She was a grandmaster at a chessboard the size of a solar system, and she had just tipped the board into the third dimension. Human ships used Saturn's rings for cover, appearing from behind curtains of ice and rock, to fire devastating kinetic salvos before vanishing again. Squadrons of smaller destroyers used the planet's immense gravity to perform impossible slingshot maneuvers, achieving attack vectors the aliens' tactical computers deemed physically impossible. Drones mimicking the heat signatures of capital. Ships were launched by the thousand, drawing fire and sowing confusion while the real warships struck from unexpected quarters. They're not adhering to any known fleet doctrine. The Indomitus's tactical adept shrieked as a squadron of human frigates, presumed destroyed, reappeared from behind the Moon Titan to cripple a Valerian carrier. "They fight without a center," a crystalline Concord commander noted, as its ship was disabled by a wave of torpedoes launched from a seemingly empty stretch of space where a stealth ship had been lurking. The myriad swarm, accustomed to overwhelming enemies with sheer numbers, found themselves facing an enemy that used their own numbers against them. Human ships would deliberately target the lead biovessels in a formation, causing the swarm's psionically linked fleet to fall into disarray as they tried to reform around their dead leaders. Rostova watched from the bridge of the Aegis, her expression serene. The aliens fought with doctrine. The humans fought with mathematics, physics, and a deep, instinctual understanding of violence. They targeted command ships to decapitate the enemy's leadership. They sacrificed smaller, faster ships in daring runs to disable the weapons on the aliens' largest dreadnoughts. They turned the very environment of their home system into a weapon. The Imperator watched his glorious armada, the pride of three empires, get systematically dismantled by an enemy that refused to fight fair. They didn't meet his battle lines with lines of their own. They flowed around them, through them, and behind them. They were everywhere and nowhere at once. He had come here expecting to fight soldiers who would stand and die with honor. Instead, he found himself fighting ghosts who were more interested in winning than in dying. He had believed he was leading a crusade. He now understood he had walked into an ambush, one prepared for him by a species that had clearly been waiting for this fight for a very long time. Years later, the chamber of the new galactic assembly bore little resemblance to the opulent conclave of old. The obsidian tables and shimmering energy fields were gone, replaced by stark, functional tiers of seats filled with representatives from hundreds of species, great and small. It was a place of equals, a truth enforced not by ceremony, but by the memory of the war that had forged it. Ambassador Elias Thorne stood at the central podium. He was older now, his hair completely white, the lines on his face carved deeper by the weight of what he had seen and done. The cold fire in his eyes had been banked, replaced by a weary wisdom. He looked out at the assembled delegates, at a humbled Imperator Valerius Khan, at a silent Index Helix, at the myriad species who were now free to chart their own course. He did not speak of victory. He did not speak of the grand armada that lay shattered across Earth's solar system or the treaties that had been rewritten in humanity's favor. He spoke of the Odyssey. 5,000 colonists, Thorne began, his voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the chamber, left their home to build a new life among the stars. They were mothers, fathers, scientists, and farmers. They were a promise we made to ourselves about our future, a future your old order tried to extinguish. He paused, letting the silence sit. The war that followed was not of our choosing. We did not seek empire or conquest. We sought only the safety of our homes and the freedom to determine our own destiny. We fought because you left us no other choice. He looked directly at the Valerian delegation, at the Imperator who had once dismissed his species as a footnote. You mistook our desire for peace as a lack of strength. You saw our civilization and believed it had made us forget the savagery from which we were born. You were wrong. Our civilization does not erase our past, it restrains it. A restraint you forced us to release. Thorne's gaze swept across the hall. We have shown you that we are dangerous in war. Let us now show you that we can be valuable in peace. Let us build a galaxy where no colony ship vanishes into the dark, where no people are harvested for their biology, where the strong do not dictate the fate of the hopeful. He straightened, his duty almost done. Let this be the final lesson. Humanity is not a chaotic variable. We are not a discordant note. We are a sovereign people, and we will protect our own, whatever the cost. Do not make the mistake of testing that resolve again. He stepped back from the podium. The assembly was silent. The old powers, defeated and diminished, finally understood. Humanity's greatest strength was not its brutal weapons or its cunning tactics. It was not its over-engineered ships or its unbreakable armor. It was the simple, terrifying, and absolute conviction that they would burn the galaxy to ash to protect one of their own. The long peace of the great powers was over, replaced by a new, more honest quiet. It was the silence of a galaxy holding its breath, listening with a mixture of fear and respect whenever a Terran ship passed by.